On this episode,
2012.
was it just a natural end date on the calendar?
Are we actually at one of those moments where a paradigm shift is about to happen and people are on the losing side of this fight? I am the first person to actually document that.
Really?
I don't know who this weird wizard of a guy is, but he knows when to show up. What day it is in the Maya calendar.
Is there any truth to that?
Raise your glass to mysteries, cocktails and conspiracies. Dive into these histories, cocktails and conspiracies. Raise your glass to mysteries, cocktails and conspiracies. Uncover those anomalies, cocktails and conspiracies.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you may be, whether you're tuning in across the nation or around the world. My name is Shane Squarg, here with my esteemed co-host, Mr. Phillips, and we're pleased to welcome you back to another episode of Cocktails and Conspiracies, the show where we blend a little bit of mystery with a splash of curiosity and, of course, a cocktail or two. Today, we have a very special guest joining us, Dr. Ed Barnhart, also known as ArchaeoEd. Ed is a world-renowned archaeologist, explorer, and the director of the Maya Exploration Center. He spent decades uncovering the secrets of the ancient civilizations, from decoding Maya glyphs to mapping lost cities deep in the jungles of Central America. Not only is he a treasure trove of knowledge about history's greatest mysteries, but he's also here to share his unique perspective on the ancient world and maybe even debunk a conspiracy or two. So grab your drink, settle in, and get ready to join an incredible journey into the past. Dr. Barnhart, it's a pleasure to have you here with us, an honor and a pleasure here on Cocktails and Conspiracies.
Thanks for inviting me, guys. That was a super intro. Nice job.
That's a specialty.
That's my specialty. I usually go a little over the top with it. I tried to tone it back a little bit here. It's a lot to memorize, so I always have my notes there. We got a comment the other day. People are like, oh, I keep seeing your eyes flicker down. Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot for me to kind of process there. So that's why, folks. If I can get one of those cameras that track my eyes, maybe that'll be the next big investment here.
Yeah, I've always thought it's funny. We have these cameras now, and we talk live, but the technology's getting better. But at the start, you were always looking at the person on the screen, which I'm doing right now. I probably look like
me as well.
Now I'm looking straight. Now I'm looking at you. But I always thought, like, if I'm talking to a woman in this new video format, through the whole conversation, it looks like I'm looking at her breasts.
That's so true. It really is.
You know what?
If
we ever have a woman on, I'm going to have to wear sunglasses. I'm going to have to pull a Mark Norman and wear sunglasses.
It's the safest. You could offend somebody by accident.
Exactly.
It's definitely the hardest piece to navigate is where do you look, up or down? As we get in the flow of it, I just look at you because I was always taught the same thing. Look a person in their eyes, and even though your eyes are technically up here, I feel more comfortable that way.
You guys want to hear a little inside baseball, right? This is what I do. I take my window and I minimize it till it's tiny, and I'm looking at all of us at the exact same time.
Boom. That's good. That's good. Yeah, I'm shrinking us down.
Well,
then
we're here now. I won't mess with my window. It's
too funny. So, I guess the natural place to start here is, who is Ed Barnhart, and where did your interest in archaeology really begin?
Okay. Well, as you know, I'm an archaeologist. I've been working for decades, not just in the Maya area, but now I've expanded my stuff to all around the world. I'm very interested in ancient sciences. That's kind of my jam. I love to try to be a detective and figure out from the spattering of clues we have what they really knew that we can talk about in terms of science. Especially when it comes to the Americas, this is kind of like a yardstick that historians of the past have beat down ancient American civilizations on. That, they weren't really, they didn't have the scientific knowledge we did. So I love to uncover these things and, push that yardstick away from these cultures that I think deserve their place in world history. As far as how I became an archaeologist, I think in some regards, it was always in me. As a little kid, I was an explorer, and if I couldn't actually find a place to explore, I'd dream I was exploring somewhere new when I was somewhere I knew. So, when I got to college, I immediately looked towards things that would bring me to exploration and adventure. And quickly found my fill of it. Before I knew it, I was standing in the middle of the Belizean jungle, and realizing I had no idea what I was doing there. I'd say I got hurt by just about every plant and bug that you could possibly imagine. I learned most of it the hard way: not to do that, not to do this. But I kind of was always an explorer, and when I got to be an adult, I found the avenue to scratch that itch was archaeology.
Yeah. Would you say that your interest in like Mesoamerican cultures was just a product of convenience because it was here, or was there something that drew you towards it?
I was drawn towards it, but in a roundabout way. When I was in high school, for some reason, I started getting obsessed with the Inca. I read everything I could read about the Inca, and back then in the 80s, the textbook said Inca society was divided into 3 parts. 1 part work, 1 part play, and 1 part religion. And they went to places like Machu Picchu to as pilgrimages to do these religious activities. And I thought, well, I mean, if it's 10 million people and they've all got to go to a church in the mountains, there's got to be more than one Machu Picchu. That's what I'll do. I'll explore the Andes. I even told my my high school job counselor that's what I wanted to do, that I wanted to find an ancient city. She was like, that is not a realistic career, Ed. That's you really ought to have a backup plan.
Joke's on her.
So I went to college kind of naively thinking that every college had every subject imaginable. But I picked CU Colorado Boulder mostly because I liked to ski. I was 17 years old at the time. I had different priorities.
Right.
And I found out that there were no professors that knew anything about the Inca. So I looked through the catalog of things, and I found this guy that was teaching something about civilizations of Central America, the Maya, who I had never actually heard of. But I took his class, and I found it absolutely fascinating, and it was the first time I was ever introduced to Maya glyphs or anything. Again, we're talking the 90s, so, nobody had the internet. We were back in those days when we all just didn't know stuff, and that was okay. We accepted it as part of our life. There were lots of things we didn't know. So I was introduced to this for the first time, and then I signed up for a field school in Honduras. And I was one of 12 people that got invited down there, where I happened to meet the people that were really the major players in archaeology, at least Maya archaeology at the time, and fell in love with it. And I've been following that path ever since.
That's wild. I remember those times in the early days of the internet when I would sneak onto my father's AOL account because I'd see him type in his password, and I'd try to figure out everything I could about pro wrestling because I was a big fan. And I'd get into like the insider like secrets and the rumors and stuff, which were all, the dirt sheets are crazy now. It ruins the product. But it's...
I think a lot of people of the younger generation don't appreciate that they are living with, the Library of Alexandria in their pocket.
Yep.
I had to get my ass on my bike and drive to the public library only to find that book wasn't there.
You know what's funny? I sometimes tell my kids, I'll say, go to the bathroom once and don't bring your phone. And I want you to tell me about the cracks on the wall and the little faces that you see and the paint mark over here. I'm like, because when I was a kid, I could tell you where every little crack on the wall, on the ceiling, that paintbrush mark looks like a face, that looks like a question mark, everything, because you just had nothing. You just sat there and you just thought for as long as you were in there.
Pooping in silence. We were barbarians.
Yeah, one of those old school 90s poops, baby.
Gosh. So starting out in any career could certainly be daunting. At least I know that is from my perspective. I was really into computers growing up. I got into a computer career. I had so much confidence, and then I get there and I'm just overwhelmed. But at some point, everything kind of made sense to me. Was there a moment for you when everything just kind of clicked? You're like, aha, I finally got a handle on this. And maybe what was that?
Well, there were certainly many epiphanies and discoveries along my way, but I'm kind of a lifetime learner. I'm sitting here, 30 plus years of a career, and I still think I don't know jack about what I'm studying. I sometimes think, like, God, have we gone so far down a wrong track that we can't turn around? I think that, the ancient Maya, if I could tell them what I think about them, they'd gut laugh. I'm probably totally wrong. But that being said, the classes that I took from Linda Sheely were like every day in class was some incredible insight. She's the one who organized the group that broke the code of Maya hieroglyphics in the 1970s. Wow. And I got the honor of being one of her students. She was just so interesting and dynamic and had such an insight into Maya religion and Maya, just cosmos and everyday life. The way she looked at it was just literally, I overuse this word, but paradigm shifting. Mm-hmm. Like her first big book was called Blood of Kings. And she went through all of the art and really made a just ironclad argument that they were cutting themselves and bleeding their blood and then burning it, and the smoke would become the conduit through which they could talk to the supernatural world. And no one had ever seen this. I mean, we had been looking at the art for decades and decades at that point, century. And she just had this fresh perspective. And once we understood that's what she was doing, anthropologists came out of the woodwork and said, holy crap, they're still doing it today. She's totally right.
Wow.
So that was a huge epiphany. And, Linda oftentimes told me I'd come up with harebrained ideas in my papers. And she'd say, if you can't stop thinking like a Western person and put yourself in the shoes of these people and try to look at things from their perspective as we understand it, even if it doesn't make any sense to you, you're going nowhere in this field. You've got to step out of your Western mind and do your best to think like they do.
It's a good point. I guess it's such a different, difference probably not even the strong enough word. Culture, like it's night and day. I'm sure we had shared some similarities on a human level, but the culture for the most part had to be completely different. So I think that's an interesting point.
Yeah, I love, as an anthropologist, I love to find the things that we all hold in common. I think that's where the good of archaeology and anthropology really shines. When it's a force for bringing us all together and understanding we have a shared history and we're, a human race, not a bunch of disparate cultures. But right. How we look at the world, religion is so pivotal. The Christian world, so many of the things we do on a day-to-day, just regular Joe basis are based on our religious beliefs. So, stepping into the religious mindset of the Maya is absolutely key to our attempts at interpreting what we excavate as archaeologists.
You mentioned stepping out of that Western mind, and that's something that kind of resonates with me a lot from listening through your podcast and, just some of the discussions about some of these ancient cultures, these ancient civilizations. Was there a specific discovery along the way that maybe changed your perception or, your inclination or your preconceived notion about either humanity as a whole or one of these cultures, whether it's the Maya, the Aztecs, the Inca, as soon as you found out about it?
I think the Maya kind of civil war, but though they weren't a unified empire, so you can't really call it a civil war, but the Maya wars of the classic period were something that stepping out of our Western mindset and looking at what they're doing is key to understanding it. we really figured out that they were having this huge war in the 90s. Before that, we had hints that we certainly knew that city-states fought city-states, but we didn't see the big picture that they were all gathering around two teams, Team Tikal and Team Calakmul. Now, here's where the perspective of who the Maya are versus who we are is so interesting. They were having, one huge kingdom was battling another huge kingdom, and lots of little kingdoms were picking sides. In Europe, that would have been, one of them dominating the other and sweeping in and taking all the land and putting their flag in there and saying, you are now no longer Gaul, you're part of the Roman Empire. The Maya didn't do that. They would take over a city, or they would defeat a city, but then they would leave them there with their kingship and their people, and so they weren't about the land. They also weren't about a trade relationship. Archaeology doesn't see that all of a sudden they're harnessing all those people's resources and bringing them back to their city. They're not fighting over land or possessions. And when you look at the art that shows us battles, they're never killing each other. They're always like stabbing each other in the leg or in the back. They're trying to disable each other so they can bring them back to their city and sacrifice them. So the way they engaged each other was totally different. So my theory is that what they're really fighting over is the favor of the gods and the access to the supernatural world. Each one of these Maya dynasties that are in the cities, they have dynastic kings who are in a bloodline. And a person who's a king today can do that bloodletting we were just talking about, and through the smoke contact their ancestors. And the kings are different than regular Joe Farmer Maya in that their ancestors go up into the sky to join the gods, and they become liaisons to them. And the gods listen to this, and they favor one dynasty over another. So a Joe Maya farmer can bloodlet and burn his blood, but he'll just see his farmer granddad.
Right.
He can't contact anybody. It's not a telephone. It's a direct line to people who share your bloodline. And so I think that the arguments, like when Calakmul did actually defeat Tikal, and for 130 years Tikal put up no monuments, but they continued their line of kings. I think Calakmul was trying to convince that bloodline to use their bloodletting power and their connections to the gods to favor Calakmul. So that's why they were fighting. And an interesting little element, again, if we look not as our Western mind, because it doesn't make any sense to us, but if you think of the Maya, there's a time about halfway through that, 3/4 of the way through that 130-year period, where a faction of Tikal's royal family, a brother of the current king, peels off and he starts his own kingdom. And it's called Dos Pilas, at least archaeologically. It's got a different name in their hieroglyphs. But he starts writing monuments that say that he is doing all of his bloodletting rituals and conjuring rituals under the auspices of Calakmul. So he moves to another city. He's the same bloodline, so his blood will contact the same guys that the Tikal bloodline is contacting. And even though it's been, over 80 years since Tikal has fought back at all, they've just been kind of a boot on their neck, this is too much for them. The king of Tikal immediately sends his army and attacks his brother's army and city, and runs him out of the city. It's it's only about 20 years before Tikal pretty much ends that bloodline. And so they were protecting not their territory, not their possessions, but their contact to the supernatural. If his brother had managed to get his ancestors to back him and Kalakmul via him, then it's over for Tikal. Then Tikal has no support of the gods, so everything was on the line. And even though they were a defeated, subdued city, that moment was the one that was too much for them, that a brother could contact the other side. Sorry for that long-winded thing, but see how
Don't
totally
apologize. Yeah, it's incredible.
Try to apply
Yeah.
that to Europe. Nobody would do that in Europe. That's our ancestors. I'm guessing both of you guys, from the look of you, have European descent.
Yep.
They such a different game and such different motivations.
Right.
You know what's so wild about that is that a lot of what you're describing in terms of the bloodletting and being able to access the supernatural from a Western mind, exactly you just mentioned, that's very almost voodoo, right? Like to most people in the Western world, that's magic. It's pretend. It's made up. That's what they thought they were doing. There's no way they were actually achieving those things. They were going through the process, but they weren't actually achieving it, right? Like that's where the Western mind comes in. And then you look at what they did in terms of, and I know we haven't really gotten there in the discussion yet, but in terms of their architecture and their understanding of astronomy, and it's like the marriage between those two things I find is just so stark. You have, on one hand, this great, profound, religious, and again, almost sort of voodoo-like, from our perspective, part that's ingrained in their society, but the science and the math and all of that was also so profound, and just I find the marriage of those two things to just be wild. Like, you wouldn't normally, I guess, what we're taught in school, and I'm talking about, obviously not somebody who's gone through the schooling that you have, but just your basic, K through 12 type of schooling. Those two things don't generally mix, right? And I find that just fascinating.
Me too. And these are the kinds of, enlightened, epiphanies that you have when you go down this path. You turn the mirror on yourself. Like, why is that weird to us? What is holding us back? One of the big things, as you just described, is we as a culture fully believe that religion and science are two lanes. They do not intersect.
Right.
Whereas the Maya thought that they used science in the pursuit of religion. If a scientist in the United States that outwardly stated that he was doing science to prove the existence of God would be panned.
No, yeah.
There's that where you're not allowed to cross those streams in our society, right. But science was the vehicle to better understand their religious beliefs for the Maya. Their motivation, again, totally different. But their methodology, that's one of the reasons I love science and math. Doesn't matter what culture you're living in, 2 + 2 is 4.
Right.
And the sun will rise there. And 365 days later, it will rise there again.
You mentioned earlier that this is still going on, these same types of rituals. Did I hear that right?
Yeah. Now, a lot of it's been Christianized, sanitized,
Sure. Okay.
Tim was just saying that, we see a lot of this as voodoo, right?
Right.
So because Christianity has this beef with what we call paganism.
Mm-hmm.
There's only one religion, and the rest of you guys are doing voodoo. But the Maya didn't mind that. They saw other religions as just other windows into the same phenomena. So a lot of Maya today are very staunch Christians, but that doesn't stop them from also practicing Maya religion. There's a huge group of them called day keepers, but there's also ones called curanderos, healers. And they do a lot of this bloodletting. I mean, it's very rare to find in 2025.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know of anybody still practicing human bloodletting.
Sure.
But the practice of sacrificing a chicken, which again, voodoo, that's a bloodletting. That's a sacrifice.
Interesting.
That the family should eat. I one time spoke to a Maya family standing in a church in the town of San Cristobal de las Casas. They had pine needles all over the church floor. They were kneeling with their family, and they sacrificed the chicken. And I said, how is killing that chicken something that the gods see as pleasing? And they said, well, it's an actual sacrifice. We are a poor family. We should have eaten that chicken. But we didn't. We sacrificed it here. And the blood was part of it. So, the anthropologists talk about echoes of ancient culture. And when it comes to the Maya, boy, there's so much that they're still doing today that is not a carbon copy of what they were doing 1,000 years ago. But
Sure.
the thread is clear.
Influenced from it. Man, I wasn't expecting that at all. That's pretty fascinating. So, we talked quite a bit about the Maya, and I think we're going to kind of stay down that road for at least this episode. You founded or established the Maya Exploration Center.
Yeah.
And we'd be remiss if on a conspiracy podcast we didn't talk about the Maya calendar, which coincidentally you also publish every single year.
I do. I keep the Maya calendar going every year. I've got my 2025 annual calendar. Where is it? Right here. Here, it's in view. That's,
Hey, there it is.
I'm buying this today.
and this is just me doing the math.
Yeah.
There was a very solid system that goes into the past and into the future as far as you want. So I know how to do all that math, and I show people through that calendar what day it is in the Maya calendar for every day of the year. I also put in
wild.
these fun little history factoids. So like tomorrow, and I know we're recording this, so I won't say.
Sure.
But tomorrow my calendar says that it's the day in 478 AD on this day, Teotihuacan entered the city of Tikal. That's when their emissaries arrived, and it was recorded in their hieroglyphs. So I put fun little factoids like that in there.
That's really cool.
And I'm keeping the thing alive, it's funny how
That's
many of my clients are actually Maya day keepers. I send a quantity of these calendars down to Mexico and Guatemala every year because I have like Maya shamans as my clients. It's fun.
No kidding.
That's
so
really
cool.
neat. That's cool.
So
Now,
what's the
speaking of the
math
Mayan
based on?
calendar.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, good. No, you do that first, because actually that's more important. You do that first, and then I have a question about the calendar.
In the most simplistic terms, what's the Mayan calendar based on? How are you doing the math? How would you figure all this out? How did the Maya figure this all out to craft it?
Well, it is complex, and it's, there's a misnomer around that they have the most accurate calendar in the ancient world. That's not true, but it is the most elaborate. So, even when I try to simply answer your question, I can say that my calendar that I project into the future and into this year shows 3 different time cycles that were very, very important to them.
Yeah.
The smallest one is a 260-day year. They call the Solkine. Not connected to the sun. 260 is a terrible way to count the passage of the year. So then they have a second one, which is the 365-day solar calendar. So they have a sacred and a solar calendar. Then the third one my calendar shows is called the long count. And that was their kind of methodology to have a linear count of days, that they could go as far into the past or as far into the future as they wanted. And they did so to calculate astronomical things. And they were good at it. Mm-hmm. But that one has 5 different positions that are days, months, years, 20 years, and 400-year periods. So that's called the long count. It's not terribly different than what we do. Like, this is the year 2025.
Right.
And when you actually deconstruct that number, 2025, we're talking about, the first one is the tens column. The next one's the 20s column. That's Maya. The next one's the hundreds column. The next one, or ones, tens, hundreds, thousands. So the 2 is 1,000. The 0 is how many hundreds in this century. The the 2 is how many tens of years, and then 5, 2025. So, the Maya, today, what's the day today in Maya? It's 13 something. I'll if you give me a second here, I'll tell you exactly what it is, because I also made an iPhone app. If I
Oh,
can
cool.
put it
Did
on
you
my
really?
phone.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I made this little iPhone app that I can use as a calculator. So,
No
like,
kidding.
if I'm out in the field and I see a date on a stela, I can use this thing, and
That's
it'll tell me
cool.
what day it is in our calendar. So today,
Yeah, wow.
it's 13-0-12-4-6 in the long count. So there's the 5 points.
Uh-huh.
And then it's 3 Kimi, 9 Muon. So 3 Kimi is in the 260-day calendar, and 9 Muon is in their solar calendar that has 18 months of 20 days and a 19th month of just 5 days for that 365.
Wow.
That was not
That
a
is-
very simple way to explain it. I've been working on trying to explain it simply for 30 years. I've begun to realize there's no way to simply explain it.
No, there's not. It's complex. Yeah, I mean, you're talking about three different calendars. I don't. It's kind of tough
I can't
to
tell you how
simplify.
many times, especially in my early days, where somebody would be like, "Ed, only numbers are coming out of your mouth, please."
Well, if you just look at our dates right now, though, like 2025, the way you broke that down is something that I don't think your average person would think about when they say, well, what year is it? 2025. Well, how do you come up with that year? Well, I don't know. 2025 years past. Well, yeah, but break it down. Like, these are what these numbers mean.
We have a base 10
Right.
decimal system, and it's
Right.
a positional system of numeration. So those 4 numbers represent the thousands column, the hundreds column, the tens column, and the ones column.
Mm-hmm.
For the Maya, they're base 20 counters. So those 5 increments there are the, starting from the beginning, they're the ones column, the 20s column, the 400s column, the 8,000s column, and the 160,000s column. Except that the long count tweaks that third position. Instead of going 1, 20, 400, it goes 1, 20, 360 days. And then the next one is 7,200, and the next one's 144,000. That is hard to wrap your mind around, because we know they have a counting system that should be base 20. They tweak
Right.
that third position at 360. The simple explanation is
Right.
they're trying to approximate the solar year of 365 and forcing it into their base 20 system. But that's an unsatisfactory answer for people that we know were such brilliant mathematicians.
Right.
There are deeper ideas, but we still have not, here's your conspiracy, or mystery at least. Why exactly did they do that, and why was that okay with them? Because as that ran through into the future, it was 5 days off the solar calendar every year. So farmers couldn't use it at all to productively talk about when to plant and when to harvest. But they had that separate 365-day calendar rolling right alongside it. And they saw no conflict. They recorded these dates. There are literally thousands of dates recorded in the long count with the solar calendar right next to it. And they ran their different 5 days off every day cycle for millennia, really, if you count my calendar.
Right.
Has anyone
And
So did
tried
they-
to match
I
that?
say my calendar like I'm the only guy following the calendar. There's an association of, I think they're up to 7,000 people in Guatemala that call themselves day keepers in their
Really?
language, Aki. And those guys count the days of the calendar every day, and they're priests who speak to the spirits of the days of that calendar. There are 20 day names, and they all have their own personality and qualities, and these day keepers speak to them as if they're spirits they can commune with. They all have their different character. and the daykeepers communicate with them and send their messages to their communities.
Such a different culture even today, right? It's just from the West. Like, it's just such a completely different way of thinking and living your life and what's important. That's wild.
But, a way that we're the same is
Sure.
that they use that day system in the sacred calendar. The 260 is what they really care about. That was the first one they ever created and the strongest surviving one. What day you're born on defines your personality and destiny. What jobs you'll be good at, what your personality is, what kind of personality traits you should avoid. And so my calendar app also will calculate your birthday and tell you what your horoscope is in the Maya. But they live this every day. If somebody comes to one of these daykeepers and says, I'm depressed. What's wrong with me? He can look through and say, well, here's one problem. You're a 3 Chuen, and you're working as an accountant, but Chuen, you should be an artist. You're not maximizing who you are in your heart. Or, a funny little analogy or a story. I met the Guatemalan Mesoamerican ball team. Like, they have revived their ball game, and they have a team that's like the national team that plays. And I met these guys in Tikal one time doing a documentary, and we were sitting around having beers, and I asked them, hey, what's your? I'm 13 Keeb. What's yours? And they went around and told me who they were, and one of them said, I'm 13 Emish, and I said, that means you're nuts. And his buddies just fell out of their chairs. He is nuts. It is true.
That's so funny. So man. I do want to ask you about the ball game. That's one of the big things I wanted to ask you about. But before I forget, because we're talking about the calendar, as it pertains to the long count calendar, right? So I had always heard that the Maya believed that the Earth had gone through kind of successions of creation and destruction, right? And you could tell me whether or not they actually believe that, or if that's just shit that Westerners made up.
That's already true.
But I along with that, I had always heard that they believed that we were living in kind of what they described as like the fourth Earth, or the fourth cycle, and that cycle began around, I think it was somewhere around 3,100 years ago, something around there.
3,114.
Boom! I was damn close. 13th. I was damn close. So I find that fascinating, right? Now, and I had always wondered whether or not, kind of like, how do we know that? And also, and I would guess because of your ability to read their writings, but kind of what's your thought process on why did they think that, and what's the significance of that 3,114 year time period?
It is fascinating, and a subject that I have been studying and contemplating my whole career without, spoiler alert, without really a reasonable answer. What I do think that our well, you didn't even ask the question about, the end of the world that was supposed to be in 2012. Not yet. Okay, we'll get there. So let me not, I won't spoil that one yet. We know that they believe that there were 3 creations before this one, and that we are the people of the 4th creation. We're made out of corn and the blood of the gods. Again, the gods had to drip their own blood into the corn, and it created us. But we're their 3rd attempt. And we know that from basically the Maya Bible. The creation story is called the Popol Vuh.
Uh-huh.
And the Popol Vuh was written down from a book that was mostly hieroglyphic in the 1500s. In the early 1500s, a priest caught Maya folks that were part of his community with this book that they were reading in the church, and he said, sit down, we're going to write a Spanish and Quechua version in the European alphabet. So we've got that thing, which actually very clearly tells us about those three creations before us. Details. They were made of mud and sticks, and they were wiped out in things like floods and the animals tearing them apart, things like that.
Jesus, that's
So we
terrifying.
know that. And then an exciting thing that happened in my lifetime career was that we had that document since the 1500s. But once we broke the Maya code of hieroglyphics and we started reading monuments, we actually saw that story told on many different monuments. The story goes on. The pivotal moments of the Popol Vuh happen in the years before the fourth creation starts. And our heroes are these two twin boys, the hero twins. Their names are Hunahpu and Shibalenke. And they go down into the underworld and they defeat the Lords of Death in a ball game, resurrect their father who becomes the maize god, and so now we have maize or corn, and they set the fourth creation spinning by moving the stars. They go up into the heavens and they start them spinning, and the clock says many, many, many monuments starts on this is the part that gets us eventually to the end of the world. Every monument that says the start of the fourth creation doesn't say day 0. It says in the long count 130000, which says 13 400-year periods have been completed, and then the date in the sacred and solar calendars is 4 8 Kumku, which is also a super brain teaser. Wait a second. If it's restarting like the odometer on your car,
Right.
why isn't it all zeros? Why the hell do we have 13 and 4 and 8? What does this even mean? Why did they pick this day? And as far as archaeology can tell even today, there were no Maya communities in 3114 BC. Why are they projecting back to a date before any of their cities existed?
Yeah.
What does that date mean? We still haven't figured that out. There are published theories about zenith passage and latitudes, and they connect elaborate things with astronomy, but nobody has come up with one that everybody says, that's it. Mystery solved. There's opinions. There's no consensus.
Yeah, that's
Mine-
fascinating. Shane and
gonna
I
ask-
always talk about, like, people don't generally just make shit up. You know what I mean? Like, it's yeah, okay, you could say sometimes they do, but there's got to be some grain of truth or reasoning that they chose that, right? That they chose to go back that far and possibly even further, right? Like, I'm sure they weren't, like, these were people that, yes, while they were brilliant in the maths and sciences, they didn't have the technology that we have today to sit in a home like this and, you know, video with one another. Life was a little bit more difficult. They had to go out and procure their own food and things of that nature. So the ability to just relax and make things up, well, I'm sure they had some spare time to do that. It wasn't as prevalent as it is today, so I just always found that really odd, you know?
Well, you know, social economic diversity is a key factor in our thinking. That, you know, at some point somebody had to make this their full-time job. No, you know, farmer in his day off came up with this thing. This was a concerted effort and institutionalized very early. You know, the earliest long count date we have, that it's not a backwards projection. We have lots of math that goes back, you know, 33,000 years. There's one at Tikal that goes back 5 million years.
Wow.
But the ones that we say, okay, this is an actual contemporary date on this monument. This is like an establishment date. It's 36 BCE in Chiapas, in a place called Chiapa de Corzo. So by 36 BCE, they're carving the long count in stone. And I love to say, you know, by the time they're carving it in stone, this is not a first crack at it. They've done it on paper a bunch, and it has to be at least a generation earlier than that by the time they were confident enough to scrawl it on the wall, inscribe it on the wall of a temple. So there, that complex calendar system was in place before most of the Maya civilization even began.
I had a question on the Aztecs, actually, because I was under the impression that the Aztecs were the ones that had the 4 ages of people, or 4 ages of civilization. Am I
You're
misremembering that?
partially right. They did have a concept of ages, but the Aztecs said we're in the fifth sun, the
Okay.
fifth age. The Maya, when you look at them contemporaneously at contact, the Maya are absolutely clear we're in the fourth creation, and the Aztecs are absolutely clear we're in the fifth
In the
creation.
fifth. Okay. Yeah, we were talking about
Now,
that
when
before
you
we
look at
started
the
today,
Aztec
specifically
one,
on that.
though, here's a little thing that blows my mind. Another thing that I have a hard time wrapping my head around. When we think about cycles of time, again, Westerners, we think of that clock on the wall with the two hands. Boo, it goes to
Hmm.
12, goes to
Yeah,
12,
yeah, yeah.
goes to 12. It doesn't, every once in a while go to 14. It goes to 12, it goes to 12. But when you ask the Aztecs, when Sahagun asked the Aztecs about the nature of the four creations before them, they said that they were different time lengths and all really strangely short. One of them is 376 years. Another one is 674 years. There's another one that's 312 years. And then a copy of 376 years. All of those are increments of 52 years, which the Aztecs were
Okay.
very much watching this new fire ceremony that they do every 52 years. It's actually, if you have the solar and the sacred calendars, 260 and 365, and imagine them as cogs like the Mesoamericans never did. But if they all, you can have a unique day in with those two cycles will give you a unique day as they revolve through each other for 52 years. And at that point, it resets. So if you're not using the long count, you're just revolving a solar and a sacred calendar through each other. Every 52 years is when they will hit the same exact day. So now the Aztecs had a way to record history in 52-year increments. But we archaeologists are oftentimes confused which 52-year period are their monuments talking about.
Right. You mentioned
So,
cogs. I can't help but think of the
I
Antikythera
kind of
mechanism.
I digressed there a moment.
Yeah, no, it's
The
fine.
the real mind blower is that the Aztec time periods, their epics were not the same time. So they're not really it's not really a cycle. They're eras or epics that they defined as different time lengths, which blows the whole let's mathematically calculate this thing out the window.
Right.
Right. That makes it pretty damn hard to do.
You mentioned before moving the stars. Was there any context around what they said when they reached up and moved the stars? Would that be like stabilizing the Earth, for example?
It seems to imply that time had frozen and the magical deeds of these hero twins started it again, or it reset. That's really my theory, is that the magical deeds of the hero twins reset the world and the fourth creation began, because it is weird that it's 13 400-year periods. Mathematically speaking, that fifth position of the long count goes to 20. It does not reset at 13. And there are at least 4 different Maya calculations around in codices and in the ruins in the monuments that show us mathematically, yes, it does go to 20. So why the hell did it reset at 13? It's confusing, and I think it's the magical deeds of the twins when they stopped the third creation, and when they set the stars spinning again, that started a new creation.
The only reason I ask is because we recently did an episode on the hollow moon theory, which was completely new to me. And the theory, just to kind of synapse this for those that didn't catch that episode, is more or less that the moon was placed there. And so when you say that they reached up and they grabbed the stars, right? It strikes me as like, all right, well, if you place the moon there to stabilize the Earth, maybe there was some sort of similarity in those stories across the way. Big stretch, I know, but it clicked something for me, which I know is going to segue into
lots
Tim's
of
question.
Mesoamerican cultures talk about a creator deity setting the moon and the sun up in the sky. And just to be clear, I might have misspoken there, but the hero twins and a bunch of animals and some guys named the Paddler Gods with their dad, who's the maize god, row this canoe up into the sky. So they weren't on the ground and reached up. They actually traveled there. They went up into the sky. And there's supposed to be constellations or planets. There's a bunch of opinions on that too. But they might be the Sun and Venus, the hero twins. But it's frankly confusing, and I'm not sure whose theory, if any of them, are correct.
For sure.
Tickling some of my my ancient alien belief there. I love that stuff.
Boy, I've appeared on that show a few times.
Oh, yes, I know. So trust me, I know, my friend. I was quite excited when Shane said that he had reached out and made contact with me. I was like, no way, dude. Because I remember from back then.
I refer to myself as the wet rag of ancient aliens. When the alien fire gets too high, they call me in and I tamp it
Smother it down a little bit.
Some
You
boring
need that, though.
historical
You need
facts,
that.
and then they cut back to them or commercial.
You know what? I should have called Ed. I should have called Ed when Shane did his Giorgio hair that one episode. I should have called Ed and said, "You got to knock him down a little bit."
I got so flustered.
So many
that
friends like dare me to put my hair up for an interview. Like, no, I'm not trying to poke anybody here. I'm just doing my job.
I was just, my hair was a mess. I needed to get it cut. I was sick that day, and I didn't feel like doing anything. We had to record, and my hair was just out of control. It was a big poof. So I said, you know what? It's very reminiscent of Giorgio there. I'm going to lean into that for this episode, but
Well, you should
I never
pull
did it
your
again.
fan. See whether you should just wear it like that from now on.
When I
great.
watched back those clips on that episode, Ed, I was mortified that I published anything out on the internet with me looking that way. So I think for now I'm gonna stick with the shorter cut and try to make sure it looks halfway decent. While my hair's still here.
Oh, gosh,
Yeah, you got to try everything.
I
my friend.
commiserate with you on that. This whole like being a talking head that lots of people see is terrifying.
You know what? We actually we talked about doing this podcast, Shane, for well over a year before we recorded the first episode. And it was just, it was a theory. It was something that we were always interested in and we wanted to do. And one day, and there was definitely some trepidation there between, or I should say surrounding, like, hey, we're just going to like expose ourselves to potentially millions of people. And then one day we were just kind of like, fuck it, who cares? Like, let's just go have fun. What do I care? And I know personally, we're still kind of in our infancy, if you will, in this whole thing. And I mean, who knows, maybe my opinion will change at some point, but I still don't really give a shit. I just want to have fun. Hope people like it. If they don't,
You're doing a great job to me.
it is what it is. Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate
It's
it.
kind of you to say.
I still, my podcast, I don't do it live recorded like this. I'm going to eventually, but I enjoy the fact that I can do it in my basement in my pajamas with my hair sticking up and nobody knows.
Yeah. Before we get off the subject of the calendars, one of the things that I wanted to ask you, and Shane and I obsess over the younger Dryas, right? And I'm sure you're familiar with the younger Dryas. I know you've done work. You were on Ancient Apocalypse with Graham Hancock. Very jealous, by the way. Super cool. And what Shane and I have, it seems awesome. I would, my God, I mean, we talk about Jimmy Corsetti being a dream guest a lot, and he is, but my God, Graham would really take the cake. Maybe 6 years down the road when people actually know who we are. In any event, we have found through a lot of our episodes that we really, on the surface, never thought that they would be connected. We're able to, in a very rudimentary way, connect some of those theories and the timeline back to the younger Dryas, which was about 12,000 years ago, roughly. Is there anything in Mayan lore or history or the long count calendar that kind of points to any significant events around that point in time?
Succinctly, no, not 12,000 years ago. There are, there's possibly one hit on that in the corpus of 3,000 plus hieroglyphic texts. I would not boast to know them all, but I am very interested in the ones that we call deep time. If they're not talking about a contemporary thing or their grandparents and it goes somewhere far into the future or the past, I am pretty well in command of that part of the corpus. And I don't think there's anything that's 12,000. There's a repeated 33,000.
Interesting.
That's interesting.
There are increments of the long count that are above Baktuns. The 400-year period is not the only one. The next one is Pictun, and that's an increment of 160,000 years or something. And there are anyway. The Pictun is the Pictun's the one that's 8,000. 7,200 actually because of the math. But anyway, there are certain things that talk about numbers of Pictuns that go back to 33,000 years, but not 1,200. And of course, there's a lot going on in the world at 1,200. I mean, that's the Clovis moment. That's when the mammoths die out. There's definitely something major and catastrophic that happened at that time. What I don't have a strong opinion, conclusion, theory about is what caused it.
Sure.
Right now, Graham Hancock and a group of others are real hot and heavy that it was a meteor impact.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And that it really wiped out a lot of things, changed the temperature. Perhaps. I mean, and there are geologists who are thinking about this issue and publishing papers. When I was a student, say 20 years ago, the Younger Dryas was still a thing. But at that time, it was explained by a theory that said as the world started to warm around 12,000, it's like 12,800 or something.
Yeah.
That as the ice started to break up in Canada, that there was this big lake that formed. It's called something like, it starts with AG. It's like Agassiz. I can never say the name right, but it's got an A and a G and then a lot of Z's. But it starts to melt. So the theory said, and then it shot a bunch of floating like icebergs and things down, basically like where the Great Lakes are, and out I guess it's the St. Lawrence River, and that this huge kind of landslide of super cold water hit the Atlantic and suddenly changed the temperature, and the oceans were receding at that time. They rose back up. And so it changed the weather, changed that. That was what textbooks said when I was a student. Mm-hmm. And so now there's this new idea that it's not that it's crater impact. And I'm just kind of watching like you guys are with a box of popcorn, figuring out who's going to actually come up with a theory everybody can get around. I don't want to accuse anybody of anything, conspiracy-wise or other.
Sure.
But I will say that we live in a world now where people just get their own scientists. There's this moment where science used to feel kind of a unified thing. But now there's like teams of scientists against teams of scientists. So, I've read papers of geologists that explain this Lake Agassiz theory. And then I've read some of the ones that are backed by Hancock and other folks. And I'm not a geologist. So when they get to those weird spectral graphs and, it's like, oh, look at how this changed over time. And, obviously, thorium was involved here. Like, I don't know what the hell they're talking about. So it's hard for me to determine whether we're on some exciting paradigm shift or whether people are just selling books.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Part of me gets really excited about that ability to kind of find warring groups on a similar subject. Because, right, like the idea is that if you have two people looking at it from different perspectives, we can come to that one common theme, that one common thread, kind of eliminate out, the things that aren't true. But if there's one thing we've learned since doing this podcast, even in the world of conspiracies, and again, we take a very realist approach in a lot of it. So we could take the most basic approach to something. You get warring factions that are warring over such minute details that they forget the bigger picture of, did this happen or did it not? If the answer is it happened, all you have to do is kind of unify to show that this is like the general consensus of how it happened or maybe why it happened, and then you figure out all the details later. But people get so hung up on that for, I think, exactly what you're saying is, can I sell a book? Can I sell a TV show? How can I monetize this? So,
Oftentimes,
pros and cons.
The trouble with discerning the truth is that humans get in the way.
Yeah,
Truth is out
that's
there.
right.
Truth is true. I love the Greek idea of, they idealized the truth, and it was a constant of the universe, and people could say what they want, but it never changed the truth.
Never changed the truth.
we step in our way. There's big personalities involved, especially in archaeology. I mean, I can't even count on my hands the number of episodes over the history of archaeology where some, grand old man of archaeology who came up with a theory that changed everything is now sitting in his, ivy tower, and he hates the thought that his life's work is
Right.
going to be dashed on the rocks of history. And he fights, and he's got reach, and he's got connections, and he can shut people down. He can get people not published. He can get,
Yeah.
the Society of American Archaeologists to write nasty letters. These happen all the time. Maya hieroglyphs was held back for decades by some big bully named J. Eric Thompson, who said, it's not real writing, it's esoteric time worship, they're obsessed with the calendar and time, and for decades, anybody who spoke out against it was ridiculed publicly by Thompson and his boys. And when a Russian came up with actually cracking the code, he called him a commie, and said it was all propaganda and lie.
Of course. Easy scapegoat.
So are we standing, and every great idea that humanity's ever come up with replaces an older idea of what's really happening. And there's a force that's going to fight for that old way of thinking till their dying breath. And there's the folks that are trying to push it forward. When it comes to this younger Dryas thing, where are we at? Are we actually at one of those moments where a paradigm shift is about to happen and people are on the losing side of this fight? Or is it going to become one of these things like, every single century since the birth of Christ, somebody said the apocalypse is now. They've all been wrong. They've all had, sometimes
Thankfully.
really convincing theories and thousands of people believing them. But again, the truth showed up, and we were still here. I just ran through my own personal, the Maya apocalypse of 2012, and we're still here. We all had a lot of opinions about it, but the truth shone through.
There's
it's
an old quote that says, the easiest way to change people's minds is to wait for them to die, because you're not going to. And so that always sticks with me as we think about a lot of this stuff.
I think about that. I am a big fan of an old book, Dale Carnegie's How to Make Friends and Influence People.
Yep.
And Dale's number 2, after everybody loves their own name the most, that's their favorite word. Number 2 is, don't try to correct people. Nobody ever thinks they're wrong, and it'll just make them not like you. It's true. Nobody convinces anybody that they're wrong. It just embarrasses them. It comes from an internal reflection, and the moment that you think it's your idea, then you're cool with it. But yeah, this whole argument of trying to make each other believe something else, it's really a fool's errand from a humanity perspective.
So Ed, you touched on the apocalypse.
2012.
2012. We touched about it a little bit earlier. We said we're going to get there. Let's get there now. Why was it wrong? Was it a miscalculation by people interpreting the Mayan calendar? Was it correct, but nothing was ever going to happen? Was it just a natural end date on the calendar? Give me some context around 2012.
I think the crux of it is, did the Maya actually say that the fourth creation would end in 13 Baktuns? Like the third creation, they say again and again and again, it ended at 13 Baktuns. So not 20. So if you do the math from 3114 BC, August 13th, and you say, okay, what year will it be 13 Baktuns from now? Which, from a clock on the wall perspective, when it hits 13, we're going to be in the fifth creation. The fourth creation will end. You get to the date 2012, December 21st, which happens to be winter solstice. Neat. That in and of itself people wrote entire books about the fact that it was the 21st. John Major Jenkins was the main proponent of the idea that somehow they were setting the winter solstice sky in the galactic center of the Milky Way, and that's what they had planned. And I don't really take stock of his theory, and we had many a polite debate about it. John passed away, unfortunately. But anyway, that's the crux of it. That if you do the math, you get to 2012, December 21st. And the first person to mention this was actually Yale archaeologist Michael Coe. In a new edition, there's a textbook called The Maya. Great textbook. If you want like one simple book to understand a lot about Maya archaeology, simply The Maya. It used to be Michael Coe. He passed away. I think there's Rex Kuntz is one of the... No, Rex isn't one of the authors. But anyway, it continues on. And Michael, in the 1960s, did a new edition. And I met the guy many a times. He had a fun sense of humor. And he sarcastically put in the end of the new Maya calendar chapter... He did the math and said, so if the Maya are right, we all better look out for 2012. And people globbed onto it.
They took it.
Jose Arguelles used it to create the harmonic convergence and the talk of 2012. That thing, in the 70s where everybody went to ancient ruins and communed, and it was supposed to be the coming of the Age of Enlightenment.
Yep.
All that stuff was actually triggered by Mike Coe. And he told me personally, like, if I knew it was all going to blow up like that, I wouldn't have made that stupid little joke.
You really can't write anything down because people take it out of context. We did a time travel episode, which will actually air as we're recording. This is coming out this Thursday. And there's a story about Rudolph Fentz, who was a time traveler that showed up in Times Square. And it turns out that was literally lifted. Like it was passed around as gospel in the 1950s, but it was literally lifted from a short story that was written in like a newspaper or a tabloid. And people just ignored that. And into this day, even though you can still find that short story, they still think Rudolph Fentz is real. We did the same thing with Ong's Hat, New Jersey. We had the author of Ong's Hat on here on the show, Joseph Matheny, and he told us about it, and he's admitted it publicly, but now he's, a CIA operative and blah, blah, blah. Like, it's all these other... He's like, I wrote it. He's like, here's the original writings. Like, I was doing this as a joke. But sometimes, that little bit, people take it out of context.
This whole thing, that reminds...
That's crazy.
Have you guys done any episodes on Scientology?
Not yet. No, it's...
No.
That might come.
I'll give you my little pet theory. Read The Mountains of Madness by H.P. Lovecraft and compare it to the story that they get at level 10. L. Ron Hubbard was a science fiction writer, challenged to create a religion, and I think his favorite author was H.P. Lovecraft. And if you look at The Mountains of Madness and the alien ship they find under Antarctica. Oh, it's a lot like the Scientology story. Now, Scientologists,
Wow.
no offense, don't come after me.
Well, see, that's we got to sometimes navigate these
Man,
things.
we're talking about conspiracies. I'm starting one right now. L. Ron Hubbard based it on H.P. Lovecraft. Go.
That's interesting because that also spins off into there's an Antarctica theory too that there's an alien spacecraft underneath there. So again, lifted right from there.
Have you ever read The Mountains of Madness?
I have not. No, I do like
It's a
Lovecraft.
short
I've not read that
story.
one.
It doesn't take very long, but it'll blow your mind. It connects a lot of dots.
Man, you're giving me a lot of reading, a lot of homework
Yeah.
to do here. I'm not going to lie.
I am a professor. You guys know.
Yeah, see, that's right.
Bring your
That's
papers
right.
in by Friday.
Did you know L. Ron Hubbard is the most published man in the world? I didn't know this until recently. Yes, nobody has published more than L. Ron Hubbard. Most of his stuff wasn't very good, but nobody published more than L. Ron Hubbard.
That's crazy. That is
Yeah.
really nuts.
That guy wrote a lot of stuff.
I gotta Google that. I wonder what the crazy boat captain wrote.
So I want to kind of bring this back to ancient aliens, which you talked about earlier, and we could touch on this pretty briefly because I want to be respectful of your time here too. With I think any ancient culture, there's always myth that surrounds the legend, and I think part of that is people just trying to fill in the blanks to the questions they don't have answers to. So I'm gonna kind of stagger this question with a few questions, and you can kind of pick the angle you want to take here. But do you believe that ancient civilizations, we could talk specifically Maya, we could talk about all of them as kind of a group here, do you think they're solely responsible for their cities, their settlements, their culture? Do you think that there was influence from a culture before them, or that there was influence from gods or extraterrestrials, like we talked a little bit about ancient aliens? But I think I know where you're going with that one, but where do you think this all originated from? I know we touched on it earlier. I just want to kind of dig deeper.
Well, I do not see any archaeological evidence that would cause me to believe that there was alien contact in the ancient past. That's what we'll just put that one to bed. And that's we have excavated a fraction of our ancient world. So that's not to say
True.
that evidence couldn't come and surprise us someday. If I find a spaceship under Maya pyramid, I'll let you know. But up to date, there's nothing really that would convince me personally that there was contact. The other part is, were they influenced by earlier civilizations? That's where I think we really still have major blind spots in archaeology. I do think, if we're talking about the Maya, we're still trying to puzzle out, when exactly did they evolve into a culture or a civilization? Who influenced them? They have contemporaries, and those contemporaries sometimes have older origins than we realized in previous or past generations, like the Olmec. I just completed a 12-lecture series for the great courses on the Olmec. This spring sometime, my new course on the Olmec. And I really talk about, how old are they? What was the culture before them? How did they influence the Maya? How did the Maya influence them and the Zapotecs? So I think that in terms of did a group like the Maya have earlier civilizations that they developed from? Yes, I at least I hope so. I hope that in terms of job security for archaeologists into the future, that we don't just solve this and go home.
Be done with it, yeah.
I like the mysteries of our world, but I was just on a guy named Lex Friedman's podcast, and that was the
Were you
first
really?
question he asked. Yeah,
I
believe
love
he
Lex.
told me. That was crazy.
Shane is the biggest Lex Friedman fanboy.
Dude, 3.5 hours of a conversation with him. 3.5 million hits so far. So
He's
that's
unbelievable.
pretty
He's
cool.
unbelievable, yeah.
But anyway, his first question right off the bat was, do you believe there are unknown lost civilizations? To which I replied, yes. And that we've already seen it happen twice in just my lifetime. And I look forward to the next one.
That's cool.
The Göbekli Tepe is absolutely amazing, and it's still going. Now we call the whole region the Tas Tepler, and they're finding more and more and older than Gobekli Tepe. Absolutely solid archaeology with carbon-14 and all that. The other one is the Amazon. I mean, when I started out, we knew nothing except some vague myth of El Dorado. Now we have thousands of massive geoglyphs and evidence of cities that were farming and living in very complex ways in the middle of the Amazon. There's just 2 examples. Just in my lifetime, we've had major shifts, both in what we knew existed and how old it is.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I thought you were going to say something there, Tim. You kind of moved your mouth.
I was trying to gather my thoughts and think about the best way to say it.
All right.
So, coupled in one other thing, we talk about this a lot. Not just ancient lost civilizations, but the possible technology that they might have had, right? That we don't know about, based upon the megaliths and the structures and we could talk about excuse me. We could talk about ancient Egypt and how do they build what they built, and we could take a look at some of these giant megaliths that are in the Amazon, right? And how in God's name were they able to build what they built there? Do you think that there is some lost technology that we're unfamiliar with that enabled them to build these fantastic structures?
No. So come on, Ed. See you guys later. All right. I think that what we've lost is inspiration and mother necessity. We live very comfortably in our little world now. There's not a whole lot of pressure for us to, we're back in the past. There was, inspiration religiously and also just in terms of survival that I think people got together. When people get together and are single-minded about something, especially if there's, religious zealotry involved.
Sure.
The capacity of humans is unlimited. These giant structures we made, these giant stones we moved, I don't think that I don't see any. I love the science, so I'm looking, me personally, I am looking specifically for anything I can call engineering, chemistry, mathematics, astronomy. That's my jam. So I look and look and look for that stuff, and I buy the books that have the theories, but I don't see anything outrageous that humans couldn't do at all. On the face of it, why would a advanced civilization come across the universe and teach us how to move big rocks? That makes no sense. They would have had a grander plan to hand us, give us the combustion engine, give us give us some sort of medical advance. They came all this way to show us how to move big rocks. That makes no sense.
Never thought about it like that. Yeah.
No, that is a good point, and I guess the kind of the, I don't want to call it a counter argument, just kind of playing devil's advocate. I guess the theory is that, hey, maybe at one point there were these super advanced civilizations. They were just advanced in a different way than we advanced, right? Like, we went the technological route, right? Like, none of us are in the same room right now. In fact, we're many miles apart, but we're all having a conversation with each other and we're able to physically see one another, right? So we went that route. What if one of these civilizations, or some of those civilizations, were very advanced in a different way? Maybe they were just advanced in building and things of that nature.
Agreed on that one. On the level of aliens' existence, statistically speaking, they have to exist. They probably,
agreed.
Probably entire advanced civilizations have already expired, and ones are just beginning, and they're behind us. But and I love your point about our definition of technology and what it should look like is not the only way. There could be planets that aren't carbon and oxygen based, and they're completely different things. And one of archaeology's real Achilles heels is that we only can find things that have preserved the test of time.
Yeah.
Stone, ceramic, anything biological completely disappears. So,
Oh, yeah.
I'm a big sci-fi fan, and I love the biomechanical things. There's
Yep.
what if they came over in one big organic bubble, and it's totally invisible to archaeology. That's I think that uh, out of the box thinking and even outlandish ideas are important for us to move forward. A lot of them, 90% of them will be just discarded, but
Right.
every great paradigm shifting idea that man has ever had faced incredible opposition, and everybody said that person was a nut job right up to the second they thought he was brilliant. So,
Good point.
there's a lot we don't know. There's a lot we don't know, and a lot of things that archaeology just can't detect. So, I'd say unless we can disprove it, everything's on the table.
It's a great mantra. I really actually like that a lot. Yeah.
And if nothing else,
I do speak up against theories that are really, their underveiled purpose is to discriminate or disparage against others. I will argue against those being propagated, but
Of course.
right.
what we don't know is just something we should admit humbly as people who think we're scientists.
Yeah.
And I think that, look, there's what we're talking about today and what you do is becoming, at least in my eyes, more popular. I think that more people are paying attention to it. I mean, how many different podcasts and books and TV shows and people are interested in it. And I think that it's really cool to have that mindset of, hey man, like we just like, it's okay to say you don't know, right? Like it's like that's okay. And I think that the way what we're
doing here,
yeah,
if you knew,
yeah.
you'd just stay home.
Right. Oh, exactly. That's a great point, right? And I think that the way the world is moving in, especially in terms of media, I think that the currency that the people that are successful, the currency that they operate in is truth and transparency. And I think that's just such a good mindset to have is just be truthful, man. We just don't know. You don't have to gatekeep you mentioned it earlier, right? You had these people in the archaeology world that kind of gatekeep their life's work. And I can appreciate that a little bit. I get it. I understand it. You work your whole life, 30, 40, 50-year career, and you don't want to see it brought down by somebody else, especially when you deem them to be a kook with just kind of some crazy idea. But it's like, guys, it's okay to just say you don't know. And I think the general public and those that are interested in it, we appreciate that so much more. Like, I know I do. I love it when somebody just goes, yeah, man, I just don't know. Like, that's cool. Like, to me, you're a real dude. Like, you're one of the real ones, man.
I appreciate that. And, we are on a podcast that we're hoping people click on. So there's
cool
lies
too.
the thing, that, like, I don't know does not make the news.
Valid.
To what Tim said, though, I want to add one of the things that drew me to a lot of your work is that you're not afraid to enjoy and speculate on kind of the crazy. We talked about ancient aliens and joked about that a little bit, but you said you're open to listening to it. Whereas sometimes when you talk to people, particularly in fields that things change all the time, science is one of those fields, right? Archaeology is definitely one of those fields. People get very offended if you were to question anything. And if you speculate anything, we're coming from a standpoint where we really don't know. This is an interest for us. It's not a career. And so we're going to ask dumb questions a lot, which we probably gave you plenty of them today. But instead of just dismissing it, you entertain it a little bit. You had fun with it. So that's, and I've seen that in a lot of the work you've done. And again, that's kind of what brought us here is just your willingness to kind of enjoy all the nuance of it is fun. And it echoes out really well.
And, I'd like to say that I think that most of my field, at least the people I know and respect and interact with, feel very much like I do.
That's awesome.
This vocal, argumentative, what I'd call a minority of my field, they do not represent us. They are loud voices, but they do not. I was just at the Texas Mesoamerican meetings, and just 2 days ago, and I walked in there to my friends and colleagues, and we talked about our families and our theories, and we traded things around. At no point did anybody bitch me out that I showed up on Graham Hancock's show or anything like that. In fact, people took selfies with me. They're,
Oh, that's
the
awesome.
students did. We generally are a collegiate type, and I think it's probably a fair statement for all fields
Yeah.
that the nastiest of us oftentimes have the loudest voices raised, but they do
That's
not
right.
represent us.
Controversy creates cash. Eric Bischoff said that once and wrote a book on it. So, very well said. Ed, what is one, and I know you're not going to be able to give me a direct answer, so work with me here for a minute. What is one archaeological site that you think everyone must visit? If you can only afford to go to one, if you only have a chance to go to one, whatever it may be.
Oh gosh, that is a tough question because
I knew
I
it
have
would
my
be.
own personal places that I've worked that I kind of feel
Sure.
like
I'll give you five. You don't even have to give me one. You can give me five, up to five. Give me a few.
How about a few? Let's just say a few.
I will, I'll just tell you honestly which site has just left me awestruck the most, and that is Angkor in Cambodia.
Angkor
The
Wat,
thing
okay.
is amazing and so beautiful, and the scale of things that they did just outrageous. I mean, I spent my whole career in the Maya world, and I love that stuff, and I'm not. It is not lesser in my eyes because Angkor exists, but I have to acknowledge that Angkor is this city that in like 1200 was about 1 million people. And so few people realize the scale of it. In fact,
Yeah.
most people say Angkor Wat. But Angkor Wat is one beautiful little complex of the city. Right next to it is the much larger Angkor Thom, which has a giant wall built around it, 3 kilometers on a side.
Wow.
And I did the math, and the entire city center of Tikal would fit just inside Angkor Thom.
Wow.
Like Tikal is an ant compared to Angkor.
So Angkor's
and-
massive.
It's so massive and so beautiful. The carving on every wall and the scale of the hydraulic engineering they pulled off. It's just it's my favorite site, and I'm looking forward to going back there. I'm sending my student Luke Caverns to go continue my research there in April. He's going to bring a small group of people. That's we don't have our university positions or salaries, so we make a lot of our money through leading people on these educational tours. And
That's
Luke's
super
my
cool.
newest guy doing it, and he's going in April to continue some of my archaeoastronomy research there, but also just to show people this thing. The other part of it is it's always about humans, Those Buddhist folks that live out in and around Angkor, sweetest people I've ever met. Such a pleasure to work with and just to be friends with these folks. And they still follow the same religion. So the ruins are actually still temples and churches to them.
Yeah.
That's wild.
And it hits totally different when you see a living people revering these beautiful ruins and keeping them in good condition. It's long-winded, but Angkor.
It's not at all what
No,
I
it looks
expected you to
gorgeous.
say.
It looks gorgeous. I've always been fascinated just by the architecture of Angkor.
And Cambodia gets a bad rap historically, but today Cambodia is a safe, wonderful place full of kind Buddhist folks.
Holiday in Cambodia. Call back to the Dead Kennedys.
Oh,
One of my favorite
I
punk
love the
bands.
Dead Kennedys. Should
Yeah, baby.
sing a few bars? No.
Before I forget, I don't want to completely change subjects, but this is something I wanted to ask you, and I know I'm going to forget. I'm going to so regret this. Going back to the Maya, the ball game. Okay, I know it had a specific name. Most people know it as the Maya or Mayan ball game. I don't remember if I read this or I saw it on a program once, but it was believed that, I don't know if it was common practice or maybe it was just some specific times that this occurred, but the ball that they used was actually a human head. Is there any truth to that?
Not exactly. Not physically speaking. Not
Okay.
physically speaking. It was a rubber ball.
'Cause I thought it was
There are
wild.
A lot of depictions with the head inside the ball. The reason that those art depictions are showing the head inside the ball relate back to their creation story, the Popol Vuh.
Okay.
The pivotal moment of the Popol Vuh is when the hero twins are playing multiple matches of the ball game against the Lords of Death. And in one, they play the game, the first game, and the hero twins beat them. And the Lords of Death say, oh, best 2 out of 3. Best 2 out of 3. Please stay in this house for the evening. And it's got these dangers. They're supposed to do these things or they will be executed. And so the third time this happens, where they're like, okay, best 4 out of 5. One of the twins, they're hiding in their blowguns overnight because these bats with razor sharp wings are flying around in the house. It's the bat house. And Hunahpu says to Shibalenke, hey, is it dawn yet? He said, I'll look. And he sticks his head out and gets his head chopped off.
Oh,
And it rolls out of the building. And so it's sitting in the ball game, in the ball field, as his severed head. The animals help them get a squash and put it on his shoulders and make it look like his head. And they start playing the game. He's still he's wobbling around, but he doesn't have his head. And the Lords of Death know that's his head on the ground. And they're kicking it around and they're laughing because they've already defeated them. And then the rabbit helps them. The rabbit gets mixed in there and rolls into the bushes like he's the ball. And while the Lords of Death are looking for the ball in the bushes, they do a switcheroo. And they get his head back on his shoulders and put the calabash, the gourd, like a pumpkin, onto the field. And the Lords of Death come back out to hit it, and it breaks apart, and all the seeds, and they're shamed, and they're like, okay, best 5 out of 7. No, you guys go stay in another house. But that pivotal moment where they pull a switcheroo and it's actually his head getting kicked around as a ball, when we see that in the art, it's actually, it's just calling out their creation story. Again, a Christian analogy, like we think we're so different from their religion, but, Catholics every Sunday, he's like, this is the body of Christ. This is the blood of Christ. Eat this tasteless wafer and drink this. Like you're drinking his blood? That's weird.
Yeah, no, you're right.
But those are pivotal moments of the Christian creation story that are recreated in art and in ceremony. And so when we see that head, again, try to get yourself in the mindset of the Maya, not our Christian view of it. It's calling out the story of the Popol Vuh.
That makes so much more sense. Because I remember watching that. Again, I don't remember what it was or who it was. And I remember, but they were really claiming, like, yeah, man, they used a human head. And in my mind, I'm like, shut the fuck up. Like, how do you know that for sure? Like, you could speculate on it. You don't know that they absolutely used a human head. And so last night, I'm like, I can't forget to ask Ed about this. I gotta ask Ed about this.
Art history is a wonderful tool for us interpreting the behavior of people from the past, but it does have its limits. Just because it looks like that on a ceramic vase is not proof in and of itself that happened.
Yeah, by the way, a human head would be a bad ball.
Many, many Maya rubber balls, and none of them have heads inside. The preponderance of evidence says no, that's probably a callback to the Popol Vuh rather than a macabre practice in physical fact.
Makes a lot more sense. I was even thinking to myself, like, I don't know, man, like, I played soccer for a really long time. I can't imagine using a human head as a ball and having it being a good apparatus to try to get through a hoop.
If you're a sports fan, too, you do have to give it to the Maya or the Olmec or the Zapotec. They all made rubber balls and started this game. And no other place in the world had rubber balls. The Chinese had ones that were kind of leather and full of feathers. And the Scots blew up pig bladders and kicked them around. But that's where we get the term pigskin. But, if you play a rubber ball game, thank the Maya.
There you go.
So crazy to me. Just like little things like that, right? To think that this civilization, how many years ago, had rubber, period, and they were using it in sports, and I always
And another underappreciated aspect is that this was a team sport.
right,
And,
right.
and cities had their teams that went
so
and
crazy.
fought and played against other teams. This the organized sports is also something that we should give the lion's share of the inspiration to Mesoamerica.
Yeah, that's cool.
That's wild. That's really wild. One of my favorite pastimes before we wrap this up is getting older and then realizing that some of the things I liked as a child are influenced from history. And so every time you say Olmec, I can't help but think of Legends of the Hidden Temple. And they had the big face that was Olmec. And I just thought that was something they made up that maybe meant something. And then years later, I end up here. I mean, many years later.
He was
but
the
with,
host of the show.
right. Yeah.
He was the
And
big
now-
talking head.
It was
Right.
great. I talk about him in the final lecture of my new Olmec series. I talk about the legacy of the Olmec, and I go into pop culture. He's also, Mr. Burns gives Bart Simpson a gift of an Olmec head.
Oh,
He
no
goes
kidding.
down to the Springfield Mall and buys it from Plunderer Pete's. And no one in the Simpsons family knows what the hell it is except Lisa, who's like, that's from the Olmec culture. They lived in
Wow.
the Isthmus of Tehuantepec. And they're like, shut up, Lisa. And it goes down into the basement. They try to sell it at a garage sale. And finally, it like falls into a vortex with the Simpsons house. But an Olmec head is a major character in pop culture. It's great.
It's so wild. It's so wild. And I literally, up till a couple years ago, I'd never even realized that it was an actual culture. Like it exists. It's a thing. I thought it was made up. So I love
I
finding that
just
stuff
had
out.
Luke lead our second trip through the Olmec world. We're going to do another one sometime this year. It's, a lot of it is just hills of dirt because even though
Yeah,
they made
yeah.
those huge stone monuments, all of their buildings were earthen. So, and they're bafflingly large.
Yeah.
Most of the platforms are about 1 kilometer long.
Wow.
So you just can't as a human standing on them get a perspective
Right.
that I'm on a building.
Right.
But it's an amazing culture. It really is another one of those just underappreciated. Us European descent guys.
Yeah.
This has really just been hidden from our eyes. I mean, talk about a conspiracy theory. How did we grow up in our generation having virtually no memory of these great civilizations that
We ask
were
it
in
all
the
the time.
same territory we now
Yeah.
occupy?
And even being Americans, right? You have all of this culture within a plane ride away. And it isn't until now that, again, you even realize that you were
No,
ingrained
that's not
growing
a
up.
plane right away. It's in your
Wow.
backyard.
It is. Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
Monk's Mound is a pyramid built by the Mississippian civilization in 900 A.D., and it's right outside of St. Louis.
This,
I
I
can't
was
tell
even
you
aware
how
of
many
this.
people have grown up in St. Louis their whole life, and then they see
don't
my
even know.
videos and go, I can't believe I've been living next to a pyramid. I thought you were just making things up, but I drove over there and holy shit, there's a pyramid next to St. Louis. How is this possible? Or Poverty Point. I actually, in my videos for Great Courses, apparently, I didn't even remember doing it, but I talk about Poverty Point, which is a 3,500 year pyramid still standing in the bayous of Louisiana. And I said, go check it out for yourself and tell them Ed sent you. And a few years later, I went there, and I know the head ranger, Mark. Now I do, but I didn't know him then. So I came up and I said, I'm Ed Barnhart. I've got a little group. We're going to go see the site. Could a ranger show us around? He was like, we know exactly who you are. You've sent hundreds of people. Every day,
Wow.
someone comes up and says, Ed sent me.
That's so cool.
Great.
That's so cool.
But yeah, you don't need to take
That's
a flight
hilarious.
away. I mean, a lot of your, I would wager anybody who lives east of the Mississippi who's listening to this, I will bet you that you are within 20 miles of a ancient American pyramid, or at least we call them mounds. So look for blank mound park, and you will find these things.
Interesting. Well, Tim, we got some work to
Ohio
do.
has the largest collection of massive geoworks, earthworks on the planet, and they were built all before 500 BC by the Hopewell, who were complete astronomy and mathematics nerds. The kind of geometry they put into these things at scale is amazing. But this is the kind of weird, Hancock calls it amnesia.
Right.
But,
yeah.
and
Yeah,
it's
it's a
not
great word.
far off. I think there was a concerted, when colonization started, generation after generation masked the evidence of past things. They plowed them down. It wasn't, conspiracy. Let's hide a civilization from everyone.
Right.
It just nobody talked about it. The terms we used disparaged and belittled it, and generation after generation, we just stopped talking about it to the point that it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
But it does exist. I have a dream of making a new textbook for the high school level that I'm going to call Before the Americas. Me and my team have already written up a lot of it, but it won't talk about the ugly moments of contact, because that horrible world tragedy. We're just going to cleanly talk about what was here in America before. We're going to expand American history to include these amazing civilizations that we somehow have forgotten existed.
Just imagine what that does for like tourism right here,
Yeah.
Like you said, in Louisiana, it's incredible. If
Where
people
are
want,
you guys at?
we're in New Jersey.
New Jersey. Okay. Well, yeah, you're pretty far off anything, but Manhattan had a lot of cool shit at one point.
It's all gone. Yeah, everything around here is plowed down so we can put up condos or apartment buildings or
strip
You know,
malls.
you're probably within a day's drive of Ohio.
Yeah,
After we
Ohio's
get
very quick to
done,
us. Yeah, a couple hours.
Google the Newark Earthworks. Have you ever heard of the Newark Earthworks?
I feel like I have.
It's gonna blow your freaking mind. Are you
wow,
Googling
yeah.
it?
I am.
Yeah,
I'm gonna
I
pull it up
mean,
on my-
read
I
how
love screen shares, so
that
I'm gonna bring 'em up.
octagon you're looking at. It's a kilometer across.
Wow.
It's amazing.
Here's what this looks like. Newark Earthworks.
And it's got astronomy and geometry. It's actually just been proclaimed a World UNESCO Heritage Site, and it was championed by an archaeologist named Brad Lepper, who now the Ohio Historical Connection owns it. They have wrenched it away from what was called the Mounds Country Club, and it was a 18 hole golf course.
Of course it was.
And that octagon's so freaking giant, the
that's a
18 hole
small picture.
golf course is mostly within it,
Wow.
and that's in Ohio.
That's
of all
massive.
places.
Of all places, right?
You guys could take a day trip out there, and it would blow your mind.
This is
Brad
cool.
does like monthly public tours of it. Even though now I think they got it away from the country club. I think you can visit it daily.
Oh wow.
Is
That's awesome.
Serpent Mound a part of those earthworks, or is that separate?
Nope, that's another part down
That's
near
another one.
Marietta.
Okay, that's also in Ohio, though, right?
Chillicothe along the
Yeah.
river there. But Serpent Mound's just one part of it. It's there's crazy stuff down there too. Look up Mound City. The Siep. There are hundreds of these giant earthworks that were made. They stopped making them 1,500 years ago.
Wow, and you're giving us a lot of the rabbit holes.
I think we Americans should grow up knowing that this existed on the land that
Agreed.
we now occupy.
Agreed.
I don't want to talk about the horrible diseases and
Right.
things that happened at contact. We all know, and
Sure.
One of the reasons we don't talk about that part is because we're ashamed of the moment of contact.
Of course.
But I hope to make a textbook that just kind of nimbly jumps over that and into the past, that gets young people growing up appreciating the deeper history of the place we live.
Yeah, no, absolutely. One one of the things that we just talked about recently, I don't know if you talked about this earlier, Shane, and I missed it, but we talked about time travel. And Shane had asked me, like, hey, like, would you rather go into the future or into the past? And I said, I want to go into the past because I'd love to go to these points in times where people were doing these works, right, and making these mounds, and how did you do it? Who did it? Why did you do it? You'd have all those answers. I want to know all that stuff. It's so friggin' cool.
I totally agree with you. The trick would be not to get sacrificed.
Yeah.
Showing up in your ball cap, they'd probably freak out before the sun went down.
Ed, you mentioned tours a couple
like
times
that.
here. If somebody wanted to take a tour, is that something you're offering, and where would people find out more about that?
Yeah, we have a number of tours that are up on our website, mayaexploration.org. Please put that in your show notes or wherever
Absolutely.
it fits right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we've got some of them are already sold out. I'm always late to get up the new ones, but they're all itineraries that are created by me. So they're kind of signature Maya exploration through my experiences of 30 years of traveling around. Logistics in the third world can be a trick.
Sure.
Our joking tagline, which is really not a joke, is you don't pay me for plan A. we're always coming up there. Yeah, there's one of them. We've got our very next one is to Kalakmul, and that's led by archaeologist
right away.
Zach Lindsay. He's great. Yeah, that's advertising my podcast. But yeah, we do a number of tours, and we let anybody who wants to come and learn with us. They're educational tours. We do lectures in the evenings and bring people around and explain the sites, and we go all over the place.
This is
That's
incredible.
super cool.
After Zach leads that one to Kalakmul, then Luke has one to Palenque and Chiapas area. Then I'm sending Luke to Angkor, and then Luke goes again, that time to Machu Picchu, and we only take 13 people per group, so it's a little group.
It's very intimate.
And some of them are already sold out, but the ones that are into the summer still got spaces. Like Angkor, I still have 7 places that somebody could take.
That's really cool.
That's my astronomy research there. That beam of light.
This?
Yeah,
That's cool.
at Zenith Passage, which is a weird astronomical phenomena that we Westerners again never talk about. When the sun's directly overhead at noon, these temples are designed to put this almost Indiana Jones beam of light down and shine on the monuments inside the temples.
That's just so incredible.
It's so incredible. It really
Somehow,
is.
by some crazy thing, I am the first person to actually document that.
Really?
way.
I stand in there with the monks and nuns, and they're like, the second time I came back into Angkor Thom, the nuns and monks were like, "It's him again. It must be the day. Somebody go get the guards." And I was like, "Oh shit, they're going to arrest me." But no, the guards ran in and they were like, "Please take down the parasols so we can see it hit the statue better."
No way.
And the guards and the nuns and priests were like, "I don't know who this weird wizard of a guy is, but he knows when to show up."
Dude, that's so cool.
My first time there, I was like, "You ever standing in this dark temple and all of a sudden this huge beam of light comes down and shines up the whole place?" And they were like, "Yeah, that happens sometimes." I was like, "Do you know what's going to happen in 15 minutes?" They're like, "What?" And I came back and they were like, "Who
Wow.
are you? What are you doing here?"
That's really cool. That's
So
really cool.
I invite people to come and join Luke. I've never recorded the first one in April. That's when he's going. And people can go and be part of, we're actually documenting these things for the first time.
This
So,
is cool.
your pictures could be the ones that show up in publications.
That's wild. That really is wild. I want somebody to watch my kids for a week so I can go out there with my wife. She will not
Bring
let
your
me go
kids.
alone.
I brought my daughter when she was 1.5.
Really?
I strapped her with one of those ergos to a Cambodian woman who protected her like she was her own. It was great. This woman named Poe just hopped around behind us with the
No
baby on her
way.
back. It was super.
You're a real life Indiana Jones, dude.
I'll tell you, this is awesome. You mentioned your podcast too. Where can we find that?
ArchaeoEd, anywhere that you get your podcasts. I'm all over those things, Spotify and Apple and all those things. It has a little website that I honestly just made with WordPress. It's not the Your website's really cool. Mine's
Thank you.
I got professionals making Maya explorations one, but that ArchaeoEd was really just something I made in my closet during the pandemic, and
Sure.
I just decided I enjoyed doing it, so I keep doing it. But
WordPress is a great
ArchaeoEd,
tool.
it's a funny spelling. It's ARCHAEO-ed, and it's a double entendre. It's archaeology education, but it's also just me ed.
Ah, okay.
So like the
I
British
got it.
people especially, they spell it with HEO. So
Right.
they try to. There it is. There's the spelling.
Yep.
So the
we'll put
British
this in the show notes as
especially,
well.
I've done them dirty. They spell out archeo and it doesn't go anywhere.
No worries. I'll add this to the show notes as well. You guys will see that in the description below. And
It's
then
fun.
you said,
It's just me. It's I do things the hard way, I guess. I could do a interview format like this, which would be easier, but these are just me talking about subjects for 30 minutes at a time without worrying about my colleagues or publications or references. I enjoy it because I just talk off the cuff. I can crack jokes. I can, talk about my outlandish ideas.
Hey, dude, that's the way to do it, man. I mean,
Agreed.
It's something that you're passionate about, and then to your point, you can be casual about it, right? And that's what people like us who are interested in these things but are by no means experts, people love that format. We love the casual, like you're just like we're doing now, just having a conversation with the quote-unquote common man. I think that's the recipe for success, so that's... I love the format, man. That's great.
Thanks. I appreciate that. And I appreciated the opportunity to talk to you guys and share with your audience.
listen, Ed, I've got pages worth of other questions that I didn't even get to. I'm not even kidding. Maybe not pages, but I've got several of them. So we
Well,
could
invite me
literally
back another
build that.
time. I'd be happy to talk to you guys again.
Oh my
Awesome.
God,
We're
we
going to
love
hold
it.
you to that for sure. Thank
Absolutely.
you so much for spending the time here with us today. We spent almost 2 hours here. We only requested an hour of your time, so we appreciate your generosity in that. To our audience out there, do not forget to like, subscribe, share this video. Follow Ed at archaeoed.com. I'm going to post that down in our links below. And also mayaexploration.org. Sign yourself up for some of these tours. I strongly encourage that. You may actually be seeing Tim and I there. I'm going to have to pitch this to my wife maybe for our spring break.
Come
She
on.
really likes the book.
We could do an episode from within
That would be so
a
cool.
Khmer temple.
I'm one of those people that when I go to these sites, I try not to use my camera at all because I like to really take in anything I go to visit. I try to really take it in first, but it'd almost be too tempting not to be filming everything. Put a GoPro on my chest or something. Really cool. But again, thank you so much to our audience. Until next time, we're not drinking. It's too early in the day, but enjoy your beverage as you're sitting there watching this out here. So long, everybody.